All right, friends, another episode of Bleav in Big Ten. Back here with you. I am Rhett Lewis. Excited to welcome our buddy Tom Hanafin. Of course, you know from State of State right here on the Bleav Network. But excited to have Tom with us as we go through the rest of this football season to give us some great additional insight. So, Tom, welcome. Glad to have you part of the Bleav in Big Ten family, one of our favorite guests so far. And now excited to chat with you here on a more permanent basis, my friend.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. I think the timing is perfect. The way IU was playing, the way Penn
Playoff
State
push,
was
baby.
Yeah, because if this had been a bad weekend for both of us, I think we wouldn't have shown up for work. We would just quit the business altogether.
It's over. Yeah. So excited to have Tom to be here with us a couple of times each week. Look, I mean, this is playoff push time. And I mean, we've got massive games coming up. We had some massive games this weekend. We'll get to the ones coming up a little bit later this week. But right now, let's take a deeper look at what we saw this weekend. And we're going to start by just kind of, going through the big takeaway from the week. So letting it all sink in. Tom, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and give you my biggest takeaway of the week. And that is, and then I'll have you jump in as well. That is, one, football is back in the Hoosier State. That is something that I could have said probably each of the previous 8 weeks of college football, because that's what it's felt like since Curt Cignetti took over at IU. But this was kind of the perfect storm of emotion, right? You had College Game Day in town. You had a team that played in the national title game a year ago in town in the Washington Huskies. And you had Indiana starting a backup quarterback, right? Curtis Rourke, who had been getting some Heisman buzz, goes down and wasn't able to go. So Taven Jackson stepped in, did an admirable job. But the biggest takeaway within that global IU takeaway is that they found a new way to win. And that was running the football when they had to. Not just because they could, because for the most part, look, they want to run the ball because they want to, and they want to be balanced, but they ran the ball because they needed to, and they were able to do it. And that is a big difference. And to me, the way that they came downhill on Washington in the second half was just it was a beautiful thing to watch, something I hadn't seen watching Indiana football in a long time, just to be able to impose your will on a team in the second half, literally downhill running on them. I mean, and Curt Cignetti talked to me about it at the end of the game. He said, this is a team in Washington, Tom, that came in as a predominantly man team. They won a lot of 5-man rushes, but they changed things up quite a bit in this game, went to a lot more zone. And so, they took away some things in the pass game. And for one, pass game just wasn't efficient. And so they made the decision, look, we just got to run this ball. We got to run it downhill. And we got to pick up Keith third down conversions on the ground and then end up really putting that game away with the run game. So that was my big takeaway from the week.
I love that, and it makes a lot of sense considering you got a backup quarterback coming in there, and it's just very Curt Cignetti to be like, let's take all the pressure off him and let's run the dang ball. My big takeaway from the weekend is that Oregon is the most complete team in the Big Ten. I don't think that's a shocker. It's not exactly a big reveal, but the way Ohio State struggled against Nebraska and some of the things we've seen from the Buckeyes this season, you can poke holes in certain elements of the team. That's still an outstanding football team. Don't get me wrong. And then my own, I'm biased, but the Penn State Indy Lions, I know there's a lot of Penn State fans thinking Penn State's one of the most complete teams in the country. I was very impressed to see how Penn State was able to right the ship despite injuries to quarterback Drew Aller, defensive end Denida Sutton, and we'll get into that. But watching Oregon dismantle a good Illinois football team was very impressive considering the way they took care of business against Ohio State. The rest of their schedule is very favorable. It is damn near impossible to look at this Oregon team and find a specific weakness that it's like, you know what, we're going to go at this from a defensive perspective. We're going to go at this from an offensive perspective. They are firing on all cylinders, and I don't know who would be able to topple them in the Big Ten title game. It's really a question of which big boys within the world of college football would be able to knock them off. So that's my big takeaway from the weekend. Not a shocker, not a huge revelation, but they put their stamp on this season by putting away Illinois.
They did, and they did it convincingly, and they did it quickly. I Bleav 35-3 in the first half.
It was crazy. So,
look, this was their first game playing as the number one team in the country in program history. which is pretty cool. And it was a big time ranked matchup, and it had a lot of hype. And Oregon just absolutely methodically and dominantly took care of business. We'll get to that game as well here in just a little bit. Want to get to the Penn State Wisconsin game really to begin here, because one, it sets the stage for what we're going to see this weekend with Penn State and Ohio State, and two, I mean, it's the biggest question mark now going into the rest of the season is what's up with Drew Aller. One, how did you see that unfold, Tom? And two, what'd you think of Bo Pribula in his most extensive work as a Penn State Nittany Lion?
It's funny because going into the game, Justin King and I on State of State, a Penn State football show here on the Bleav Podcast Network, we're talking about, man, the option game worked pretty well for Northwestern against Wisconsin the week before. Now, yes, that was 23-3, but you could still see the way that Northwestern was able to move the ball and really make Wisconsin a little bit frustrated defensively. Well, Drew Aller goes down. I would never label Drew Aller as an option quarterback. In comes Bo Pribula, who is much more mobile and really hasn't been asked to throw the ball a whole lot the last few years in Happy Valley. A lot of comparisons to Trace McSorley. And that entire change of the offense from first half to second half, hats off to offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki, adapting with what he had in terms of personnel. And it just worked. And listen, there are a lot of things in that game that you can look at in terms of Drew Aller goes down, your starting quarterback.
Yeah.
When you're starting defensive ends, as I mentioned, Denida Sutton goes down. Your starting right tackle, Anthony Donko, goes down. Your starting corner, AJ Harris, goes down. I think what James Franklin is doing already this week, and is very intelligent, is he ain't saying a damn thing about anybody, and everybody's a game time decision, whether they are or are not. I would not be shocked if later on this week the media was barred from practices. Like, that would be the smart thing to do. Going up against Ohio State,
closing it all in, right?
Yeah,
keeping it all nice and tight, locking it up.
The last 3 weeks, Penn State goes on the road and gets gutsy wins, and now you get to go home and host the number 4 Ohio State Buckeyes. And as I was mentioning moments ago, Ohio State, that Nebraska game, they look vulnerable.
I'll wrap up the Penn State way just to say impressively done by Tom Allen and his defense in the second half. I mean, I think allowed 10 rushing yards on 9 carries in the second half by Wisconsin, who had been really good on the ground with Tawee Walker and that whole crew. Braden Locke threw an absolutely awful interception in the second half that went to pick 6 from Jalen Reed, 4th interception of his career, put Penn State up 14-13, and it felt like that was kind of the thing that broke the thing wide open there. And then obviously Penn State scores twice more for the final margin, 28-13. So this is a big one coming up this week. And of course, we'll get to that with the matchup with Ohio State. But Tom's a business to get to here first.
Yes, Bleav in Big Ten is presented by BetOnline. Now, basketball fans, it's that time of year again. The NBA is back from opening tip-off to buzzer beaters. BetOnline has you covered with the best odds, biggest promotions, and live in-game betting on all your favorite teams. This season, every game matters. BetOnline has every stat, matchup, breakdown, and live odds to bet on during the game. And it's not just the NBA. BetOnline has odds on everything from football, the MLB playoffs, the NHL, to political props. Head to betonline.ag today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. Bleav in Big Ten is presented by BetOnline. The game starts here.
Rock and roll as we continue looking at games from this past weekend. Illinois and Oregon. You mentioned Oregon, the most complete team that you think is in the Big Ten. I will not disagree with you. I saw them in person week 1, and they did not look like that. But I think that is the strength of this coaching staff and this program as a whole, led by Dan Lanning. Oregon and their running back, Noah Whittington, who's kind of like the complementary run, not complementary, but he's kind of, the second piece of that rush game that's been led by Jordan James for much of this season. Mm-hmm. Playing this game, Tom, in which he stole a Fighting Illini player's soul.
Yes.
And it happened at the goal line. And it was one of the most fluid and physical, how should I say it, bulldozings that I have ever seen in a college game. Just absolutely took down like a speed bump in a Illini defender at the goal line going in for a score. One of his 2 scores on the day. Whittington put up 56 yards on the ground, a couple of catches as well. Jordan James, another 83 on the ground. I mean, that was as much of a statement right, as you can make right there, that we are Oregon. We are not just fast, we are physical, and we are a complete team. Dillon Gabriel keeps showing up too with rushing touchdowns, which I think only continues to add to the difficulty in defending everything that this Oregon offense can throw at you. I'm continually impressed with that group.
Yeah, Gabriel really had a coming out party, and it's odd to say because we saw what he did at Oklahoma and at UCF before that. But I mean, he had a coming out party.
Month,
yeah,
it's been crazy.
That Ohio State game, for some reason, that just worked for him. And even, we talked about it a few weeks ago, is that it just seemed like Oregon was waiting for that Ohio State game to be like, you know what, now we're going to open things up. Everything we put on tape, forget about that. He looks like Dillon Gabriel, and I'd say it's the best version of him. They have weapons at wide receiver, Stewart, Tez Johnson. Lowe also was Mr. Reliable throughout this game. That offensive line mauls people. I would not necessarily put them in the category of the behemoths that we've seen in years past from Georgia and Alabama, but let's not forget where Dan Lanning spent a lot of time in Athens, Georgia. So very similar construction of the roster. We're going to get fast people. We're going to get big, strong people to move your people around. That run by Whittington, as you mentioned, it reminded me of Michael Robinson destroying a Minnesota Golden Gopher years ago. Just to harken
I'm going to bring that up to him, Rob, next time I see him.
Please do. Please do. I think the world of him, Rob. So it was just impressive. And then even on the defensive side of the ball, really stifling things. That pass rush is very, very good. The interior of the defensive line for Oregon really made things just pure hell for Luke Altmaier. He had next to no time to throw, and he has weapons at wide receiver, and it just was next to impossible for him and the rest of the Illini offense to get anything done. Oregon looked great.
Yeah, and then that goes back to you talking about them being complete, because their defense continues to just dominate. I mean, they are so good at getting after the passer. 3 sacks, 7 TFLs in this one. They now rank top 15 nationally with 23 sacks on the season. They're allowing just over 297 yards a game. Like that's really good football on the defensive side, especially with how explosive some of these offenses can be. And they outgained Illinois by 250 yards is basically what it ended up being. I think it was a little bit closer to 230, but still that was incredible.
You talked about them making a statement, and it's something you and I have discussed before. Penn State, Indiana, and Oregon do not play each other in the regular season. Right. So strength of schedule and points scored certainly matters. That has to be in the back of Dan Lanning's mind.
Oh, I'm sure. In the way in which you continue to pile up points. Although I do Bleav there is a scenario where a member of the there is one tiebreaker. There it is. The 6th tiebreaker. The representative will be chosen by random draw among the tied teams, conducted by the commissioner or designee. So
what, are we gonna have a one-legged sack race or something like that? Come on now.
I know. It first goes to head-to-head matchups, which, as you said, those 3 teams don't have. The tied teams will then be compared based on record against all common conference opponents, which is something we'd have to dig into once these things do end up coming through. And then you get record against common opponents with the best conference record and proceeding through the common conference opponents based on their order of finish within the. It gets really complicated. Just know that they don't play each other and that head-to-head won't matter. So we're going to start to talk about record against common opponents. And then it does get into cumulative conference winning percentage. And then it's highest ranking by Sports Source Analytics. So like it gets a little crazy.
Give me the Zach Galifianakis hangover meme right now. That's how this feels. This is ridiculous. So I understand it, but
if Indiana beats Ohio State, and Penn State beats Ohio State, I mean, first off, Columbus, Ohio is going to light up in flames.
Be pretty miserable,
but yeah, watch out. It could get kind of interesting with some of the tiebreakers. All right, let's move to the little brother, big brother game. Or at least that's how Colston Loveland affectionately referred to it this week after Michigan got the win over Michigan State. And this is, a rivalry game, state of Michigan. The Paul Bunyan Trophy is all at stake here. It's a game, that it brings out the best on the field generally, and sometimes can bring out the worst off the field, or in this case, after the whistle. Or after the game goes to zeros, which we saw in this case. Didn't like any of what I saw from Colston Loveland and Anthony Jones after the game, and it kind of led to a little bit of a ruckus that took some of the luster off what was, a hard-fought physical game, Tom. And, it was Colston Loveland who said after the game, little brother going to keep doing little brother things. And so We'll keep treating him like the little brother. I think a lot of that's a little extra. I'm not not all into that truly, but the one thing I did see was that this is the best formula for Michigan, and they tinkered and messed with this thing at quarterback all over the place. And I just it makes me wonder what it might have been if we'd have seen this Davis Warren at quarterback, sprinkling in Alex Orji, maybe a little bit more so. And now they seem to have found something, although the ground game was not. I mean, Orji was the best thing they had going on the ground game. Didn't have it going otherwise. So I think that'll be interesting to follow. But I think they found something there on offense.
Yeah, I'm continuing to just be stunned that they're sticking with the passing game as much as they are, because it's just not working. I've looked at this offense and I was like, you're basically a service academy on steroids. Stick with that. That's okay. And I don't understand the commitment to it. Now, I understand Colson Loveland is a very talented tight end. You can get the ball to him, but do Michigan things. Edwards, Orji, and Mullings are more than capable of carrying the load, and you can get plenty of other guys involved in that. I'm a firm believer when it comes to sports and just about everything in life is run your race. So it just didn't make sense for Michigan to punch down on Michigan State post-game because honestly, Michigan's not standing on a pedestal that's much higher than Michigan State at this point in
not right now.
Yeah, you can say the brand is much more significant than Michigan State, but really, what did Michigan State have going into this game that was going to scare Michigan and really create the opportunity for the Spartans to win the game? Childs at quarterback actually didn't have a terrible game, 17 of 23, 189 and a touchdown. So I'm like, all right, he avoided the turnovers. You ran the ball really, really consistently for Michigan State. You tried to make it easy for a young quarterback, but they just don't have the horses to do it. It's a program that's rebuilding. Michigan taking that approach after the game did not make a whole lot of sense to me. I thought it was kind of classless.
Yeah, I'm with you on that too. I was actually kind of surprised that he had Loveland had the opportunity to talk to the post game, talk to Big Ten Network after the game, just based off what happened. But that's just that's where we'll see. They'll get all that stuff figured out, I imagine. And look, it could have been worse. So glad nothing like we saw a couple of years ago ended up happening. Which was obviously not pretty. So. And I think otherwise for Michigan State, that the clean game, clean-ish, he still had a turnover. Childs did fumble, but no interceptions. I think it's a step in the right direction for Aiden Childs, who'd been averaging, interception per game coming into this thing. So, Michigan State, it doesn't get much easier. They get Indiana coming in this week in a battle for the old brass spittoon. So back-to-back rivalry games, trophy games, for Michigan State, who also got, by the way, 118 yards out of Nate Carter on the ground. And kind of strange to think about Michigan State having a better run game than Michigan, on the day, which, is something to kind of hang your hat on. But they can't allow points on 4 of their final 6 drives, defensively speaking, with Michigan on the field. That was essentially what did it there for Michigan to get the dub. Okay, before we move into our next game recap, I want to remind you guys that the lid is often the most important part of the outfit. If you've been catching us regularly here on Bleav, you know that I do love my hats. Now, the problem is if you wear the same hat over and over again, a lot of times you get, okay, Tom, let's go.
I got you, buddy. I got you. I'm messing up my hair for you. Here.
Yeah, same. That's what we do because we love Melon, because these hats feel great and because they really have a hat for every season. That's the great thing about the different collections they have. The Hydro collection, which you could also call the Vacation collection. You could also, you can wear that thing anywhere. You can wear it in the water. It's durable, all that stuff. Jumping in the pool, lake or ocean, the Hydro collection serves you there. But also now as it starts to turn a little bit cooler, fall, we'll get into winter, football weather, the thermal collection provides different levels of warmth to keep you on the go this winter. So whether, you're tailgating out here at USC in LA or maybe out at Rutgers in Piscataway, Melon has a hat for you. Keeps you rocking and rolling everywhere in between as well. So if you're looking for a hat that is as tough as you, check out Melon. You won't wear anything else after you get one for yourself. Okay. Let's get back to the previews. Again, it was part of my biggest takeaway recaps. It was part of my biggest takeaway of the week, talking about what Indiana did at Washington. I think, I'll stick with what I said there in the run game. It sounds like Curtis Rourke might have a chance to come back this week for this matchup against Michigan State, which obviously would be incredible. Curt Cignetti saying on Monday that he did feel like he has continued to progress, and they are optimistic that Rourke will be okay there. The other thing I'll say, in addition to what I mentioned earlier about the run game, is that they have one of the best cornerbacks in the Big Ten Conference. In fact, was the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week this week. D'Angelo Pons, who was a freshman All-American at James Madison last year, came in, transferred in post-spring ball, and immediately took over and locked down one of the starting cornerback spots. He had the pick six that really lit Memorial Stadium on fire there. And that's just another little SIG reference for you. But he has been a guy that defensive coordinator Brian Haynes can count on. And he is active and triggers in the run game. He is a physical tackler when he needs to be, and has been really good getting his hands on the football. Actually had 2 interceptions in this game. One went back for 6. So D'Angelo Pons and the Indiana defense stifling Washington was a big piece of this victory as well. As Tom, Washington remains winless on the road so far this season.
Yeah, Washington just has not quite yet adjusted to the Big Ten. And granted, that entire program basically up and moved to Tuscaloosa or went into the NFL draft. So I don't blame him. I think Jed Fish is the man for the job, and it's just a matter of time with them. Here's my question to you with Indiana, as a former Hoosier wide receiver. Do they need to play Curtis Rourke on the road at Michigan State? Because you host Michigan the week after, and we just got done talking about what Michigan is, but still, that is going to be an important game. The next week, you're at Ohio State. So do you need Rourke to beat the Spartans?
That's a fair question, especially as you consider, wanting to make a playoff push here. I don't think they're to the point yet where they can afford to say, let's try and hold serve without him here against Michigan State. Because here's the thing. At this point, considering where we're at in college football, right? I mean, like, 2 losses, especially, with a very difficult game. If you can't come out on top against Ohio State, and then somehow, you trip up, trying to get cute with this thing against Michigan State, man, you're going to be in trouble. And then especially with Michigan coming in at home, playing a little bit better now, I think with the stretch, you want to have Curtis in there for as much as possible. And here's the other thing that I think goes into that. Their offensive line has been playing really good football. Mm-hmm. And it's not like he just got smoked on one of those on the play that ended up hurting his thumb. He ended up hitting it on a defender as he was following through. So I think that the play of the offensive line and the stretch ahead signals if he's ready to go, and if he's not going to hurt himself any further, they're going to have him in the lineup. But for Washington, here's something to, again, keep in context for folks. This is a coaching staff that did not get into place until after the December portal had really settled. This is Jed Fish is playing with an offensive line that has like one guy that played FBS football coming into this thing. Like that's how tough it was for them to get the guys to replace all the ones that are playing on game days in the NFL now. So I think you give him enough time. They've had some big wins. Obviously, beating Michigan was huge in that national championship game rematch. They got to learn how to win on the road, but they get USC coming in, and this is a massive game this week that I look forward to previewing later with the Trojans coming into town off a win over Rutgers to stop a 3-game slide. So they've been really good at Husky Stadium, but I think Washington will turn it around. Now let's move to Nebraska and Ohio State here, Tom. This one was interesting because I didn't know what to expect out of Nebraska coming into this thing, right? 56-7 drubbing at the hands of Indiana. And now you're going in to face one of the best teams in the country talent-wise, but they showed up, and that was encouraging. And Matt Rule said as much in the post-game news conference, which is pretty powerful.
I kind of had an expectation going into the Horseshoe, as you mentioned, after that Indiana game. I was like, this might be the beginning of a slide. And I was expecting a similar performance. I was expecting to see Ohio State bounce back and look like Ohio State, look like a juggernaut. Ohio State was 1 of 10 on 3rd down. Now, Will Howard, yes, he had 3 touchdowns through the air. He had a turnover, but this was just an odd game for Ohio State. I just could not quite put my finger on what was wrong. It seemed like the loss of the left tackle Simmons was much bigger than people thought it would be. I think there's a lot of respect for what he is as an athlete, but in terms of the way the rest of the offensive line play, they aren't bullying people at the point of attack. And that does make me feel a little optimistic for my Nittany Lions for next weekend, because Penn State's interior defensive line and defensive line as a whole should be able to have some success against them. But Ohio State put together 285 yards of total offense. 100 yards came on 2 individual plays, 60 yards and 40 yards to Jeremiah Smith and Tate. So doesn't really look great if you get 185 yards on 45 snaps. Now, that's a really good job by Nebraska to keep them off the field as much as you could. You didn't see that amount of snaps start to balloon or anything like that.
Right.
Dylan Raiola is still a work in progress, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I know people wanted to anoint him as a freshman sensation. Yes, he looks a lot like Patrick Mahomes, and he might be that guy one day, but he's just not that right now. He's a true freshman. Nebraska's defense, to their credit, played an outstanding game as best as they could. The one thing that I continue to see with Ohio State is they have the ability to go over the top. And if you allow them to beat your safeties deep and beat you outside, that's about it. Penn State does not do that. They make sure that everything goes to the interior, and you're going to see a bunch of bodies. You may get 7 yards, but you're going to get yourself hit by somebody inside the hash. So I'm very encouraged to see that, because as a Penn State fan, I want to see Penn State get the win this upcoming weekend. But Ohio State just showed enough offensively and defensively is that there are weaknesses to be taken advantage of.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I will say I thought, Ohio State's defensive line showed up in this game, 3 sacks, 13 TFLs. They had a goal line stop in the second half to kind of help keep the lead there. Most TFLs in a game in 3 years. So those guys have the ability to wreak havoc. And as you mentioned, Penn State going to be dealing, perhaps with some shuffling around on the offensive line this week after injuries. So that's something to think about. Ohio State opponents have gone 5 for 22 on third down in the last couple of weeks. That's a pretty good percentage getting off the field if you're Ohio State. Now, look, the lack of run game, I think, is something to consider. Now, look, they're still a top 5 rushing offense in the Big Ten this year. So, some of that goes back to they were dominating early, against lesser competition as well. But they need more from Quinshon Judkins, who had 29 yards rushing, and more from Travion Henderson, who had just 25 yards rushing, combined 20 carries there. So that's not getting it done for 2 of the best backs in the country. Will Howard, though, I thought for his part, pretty dang solid effort. 3 touchdowns, just 3 incompletions on the day. Did have an interception, but he's jacked up for this game too. You heard his post-game quotes.
Yeah,
right?
And it was a little interesting. I think the Penn State fans, we're all very sensitive.
Of course
we have delicate feelings. But he was a 3-star high school quarterback, so he wasn't recruited by Penn State or Ohio State. So he wasn't on a lot of people's radars. I'm not even talking down to him. There's so many stories of guys that just didn't get the star ratings. For instance, the quarterback at Rutgers, Ethan Kaliakmanis, was a 4-star quarterback, went to Minnesota. Everybody thought he was going to be better than Tanner Morgan. That never panned out. And the way that he's struggling in Piscataway is very obvious. So star ratings do not always mean this is exactly who this guy is going to be. He has proven a lot of people wrong. I think there's a lot of people, and you and I have talked about it, are making a comparison with Josh Allen, similar body type, bigger guy who can run, but can also throw the ball very effectively and is very accurate with the ball. I think Will Howard is the perfect guy to be at the control board for this offense, but I don't think he meant it in a way of like, oh, I got to go to Happy Valley and show them that they were wrong and they should have recruited me. It just sounded like, no, he was a Penn State fan growing up, and there's a little extra emphasis being at home. But I think Penn State fans are going to take it as some bulletin board material. So,
there you go. One other thing just to note on the Ohio State offensive front, obviously we talk a lot about Jeremiah Smith, talk a lot about Emeka Egbuka, but how about Carnell Tate with his first career 100-yard game and first touchdown since the season opener this year for Carnell Tate. So if he starts to emerge again as a guy that they can count on as a third option in the pass game, man, that gives defenses something else to worry about, for sure. Okay, so that is Ohio State and Nebraska, 4-point win for Ohio State. They remain a top 5 team. So the Big Ten sitting with the number 1, number 3, and number 4 team in the top 5. Then you get the 13th ranked Hoosiers, who didn't move at all despite moving to 8-0 on the season. And then you get Illinois, who dropped 4 spots to 24 following their loss to number 1 Oregon. All right, let's finish up with this episode by looking at something that may or may not have caught our eye with one of the teams or games that we have yet to talk about. I'll kick this thing off here, Tom, by talking about the Minnesota Golden Gophers, who are on a roll right now. And I mentioned that because I was there when that roll started on Big Ten Network's broadcast of the Minnesota upset of USC, who was ranked top 15 at the time. fans rushed the field. It was an incredible atmosphere there in the Twin Cities. But they're finding something now on offense where they're getting this pass game going. And shout out to Max Brosmer. If I had a helmet sticker to hand out, he would get one. Fantastic game. 26 of 33, 320 yards, 2 touchdowns apiece to Daniel Jackson, who went over 100, and Elijah Spencer, who was a yard shy of 100. Plus, Darius Taylor, their terrific running back, went for 81 yards and a touchdown of his own, and they destroyed Maryland in this game. It was 21-0 in the first quarter. And so they started early, finished strong, and Minnesota has now won 3 in a row, Tom, as they get set to head to Champaign for a big matchup against Illinois this weekend.
It's amazing. You stole where I was going to go because I was thinking about Max Brosmer. I watched that game and I was like, I thought this was Darius Taylor versus the world, but that's a great wrinkle for them to add. You and I have discussed the Golden Gophers. Is that like, are they going to line up and beat anybody from a personnel standpoint? There's plenty of other more talented teams in the Big Ten, but I've been very impressed by them. The one thing that continues to stand out for me within this new Big Ten we're experiencing, you talk about Washington SC is coming up this week. Lincoln Riley has to figure out how to play within this league, because this game, yes, against Rutgers was 42-20, but he's still getting the playoff early in the play clock, late in the game with a lead, still throwing the ball with Miller Moss. You have the athletes at wide receiver and tailback to do a lot of great things in the passing game. And it can be quote unquote video game numbers. That's fine. But this is a league that when you get a lead, you need to protect that lead. And I saw it against Penn State. I saw it in the week prior when USC was playing, I Bleav it was Minnesota was on the road, but like just some of their games that leading up to that, I was like, this man doesn't want to run the ball, but he has an outstanding running back in Woody Marks, who is a thumper and really has done some
best
great
player on
things.
offense.
I completely agree. And after transferring from Mississippi State, had been under Mike Leach at one point, not necessarily a guy who wants to run the ball. So coming from systems that weren't built for him, yet he's still thriving. Hand the dang ball off. I mean, Miller Moss is not Caleb Williams, and it's the classic issue in football and all sports. Where is it? Do you get the scheme to match your personnel, or do you have your personnel match your scheme? And I've seen it firsthand this year with Andy Kotelnicki. He looked at the personnel. How can I complement the strengths of the people that I have? This just feels like Lincoln Riley's like, this is what I do, and I really don't care who's out there. We're going to keep doing what I do. USC has got to learn this lesson. And on top of that, they're 4-4, 2-4 in the Big Ten in their first season. There have been plenty of people calling for his head. If it was a hotter sports market, maybe he would be in real trouble. But it seems like he's probably got a long leash there. If he's going to correct this from a recruiting standpoint, that's a big deal, because LA is getting fished out by a lot of other big players in college football right now. There's too much money being thrown around. They've missed in the transfer portal. If you're going to continue to play offense and defense this way, Danton Lynn has helped improve the defense, but you need to get them the players. They've had a lot of injuries on that side of the ball. USC has a lot to learn about how to play in the Big Ten.
Okay, and they've got a big matchup this week up in Seattle, a traditional Pac-12 matchup against the UW Huskies.
R.I.P. Pac-12.
Yeah, there you go. But it's going to be a great week, and we're going to be back with you later this week to get you caught up on all the action coming up this week, including a big-time preview of Penn State and Ohio State, number 3 versus number 4 in the country. What will Gus Johnson say in this game? What will the big noon kickoff do for a big-time matchup at Happy Valley this weekend? Looking forward to all of it. Tom, pleasure to have you aboard here, the Monday recap episode. Look forward to chatting again later this week. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
All right. We'll see you guys later this week. Look forward to it.